Hello, hello, everybody. How you going? Welcome. Oh, did you see Reggie just flew up onto his perch? Hello, Peter and Karen. 3 different dumplings. I'll be very interested to hear how the butter chicken dumplings go. Let's turn that up a little bit. Ricotta and feta patizzi from the freezer. That sounds delicious. Well, I've got nothing to eat, but I have got 2 wines, so that's good. How is everyone? Everyone all organised for Easter now? Finished your work for a little while? I seem to have a lot of work left to do, so but that's all right. I'm used to working at Easter time. We've got a little bit of vintage going on. We picked thanks, Cotty. Yeah, it's just kind of getting used to being short again. I couldn't cope with the long hair, so we had to cut it all off. Had to cut it off. Yeah, so we picked the Shiraz today, which is very exciting, and we're going to be processing that on the weekend. And some of you know that we have a little lunch happening on Sunday, so we're looking forward to seeing some friends at that. That's our Pinot Gris lunch, and probably eat some Easter eggs as well. Hello, Sue and Daryl. How you going? Good to see you. So this is part 2 of our Pinot Gris tasting. Oh, Zach and Jack, the Caledonian was fantastic. Really, really nice. We had hello Nina, how you doing? Yeah, the Caledonian was fantastic. It was quite a full room, and we had a couple of South Australians who still had to say your Pinot's all right, but it's just not Barossa Shiraz, is it? So had a little bit of that, but most people were very appreciative and loved the wines, and we had lots of wine to drink, so that was very cool, and the food was fabulous. So yeah, that was one of the things that inspired me to suggest maybe some prawn dumplings, because we actually had this wine with prawn and lobster ravioli, which was delicious. Robin Deb, your argon blanket kept the house fresh and lovely. Excellent. Well, I just have I've got my little half bottle of Franz Haas that I'm going to see. I know it's Franz Haas because I put the top on. I've just pulled it out of the fridge, so it's going to be too cold, which is annoying, but it's been one of those days. Anyway, Craig, we're playing around with the Magic Shiraz. So we have the fruit for the Magic Shiraz cooking away in its bags at the moment. Jeremy's got that happening. Hi, Jeremy. I think you're there somewhere, probably cooking dinner and multitasking as usual. So yes, we're doing something Magic Shiraz-y, but I think this Shiraz, some of it, Dad's still very keen to have a play with a whole bunch. So we'll do a batch of whole bunch Shiraz, and then maybe make a Devil Bean Creek Shiraz. It just depends. We're just we're waiting to get the final analysis of the sugars and the numbers for the juice. So we'll keep you posted on that. From a year when we thought that we weren't going to get any Shiraz at all, we'll see what happens. So, but Pinot Gris tonight, it was such a beautiful day today. We had an incredible pre-sunset, and then the sunset kind of faded into just greys and silvers, so not that exciting. But I was thinking today while I was working and the sun was shining, what a great day for Pinot Gris, Pinot Grigio, and now it's got a little bit chilly, so that's okay. If your wine is too cold out of the fridge like mine is, we're just going to have to use our hands to warm it up quite a lot. So let's get some wine into the glass. Jeremy taught me something interesting today. He's always got something new to teach us. With screw caps, I knew that it's better rather than, I'll do it with this one first because this one, the seal's already broken. A lot of people will open a screw cap by holding onto the screw bit at the top. Hello, Peter. How you going? Oh, good, Alison. Yeah, I think it'll be nice. I think it'll be a nice day. People screw it from the top and try and open it like that, and it's really hard. The way I've always been taught to do it is to hold onto the whole seal and then turn the bottle and then that gives you a bit more leverage. But Jeremy says even that's not quite right. What you should do, and this is probably not going to work because it'll probably be too slippery, is you should open it from the bottom. So you don't hold on to the top bit at all. You turn the bottom bit, but I can't work out which way to turn it. Hang on. I'm not doing very well, am I? So if I turn that way, this has to turn this way. Oh, God, it's very difficult. Anyway, apparently it's something to do with making sure that the seals break in the right place and stuff. I'm just going to open it my old way, though, because I can't get it open. And I really feel like a glass of Pinot Gris now. So there we go. But that's a trick. If you have trouble getting a screw cap undone, hold the screw cap, turn the bottle. You get much better leverage. Squeeze it at the bottom first. Oh, okay. It does, Cotty. Requires a lot of strength and probably not. Yeah. Thanks, Craig. Just a couple of weeks late. That would be right. No, he did it. He's just gone like that or like that, whichever way it turns, and made it look really easy, but obviously not so much. April Fools, same. Anyway, let's get some wine in the glass because I reckon probably I'm behind the 8 ball. So Devil Bean Creek Pinot Gris 2019. I'm putting that in my left-hand glass. And I'm sure some of you maybe possibly just enjoyed the Franz Haas so much that you drank the whole bottle last week. That's okay. But for those of you who have got the half bottle sitting there waiting for the compare and contrast, then a second glass will be useful. And when you've got your half bottle filled right up to the top, it's the beginning of the pour that's always the tricky one that you want to make sure you get into the glass. So you can tilt the glass and put the neck of the bottle almost into the glass. There you go. You've got that lovely Franz Haas colour. It's really, I'll just make them the same height so that we're being even Stevens. Has everyone got yummy snacks? Craig, Joan, that sounds amazing. A cob loaf full of cheese and bacon. That sounds absolutely delicious. I know there's some dumplings out there and a Thai chicken for Kay. So interesting that some of you have gone for the spicy options. I think that certainly the Devil Bean Creek will work with those spicier options. I'm not sure about the Franz Haas, but anyway, it's all part of the experiment of drinking and tasting wine. So cheers to you guys. This is the Devil Bean Creek Pinot Gris that I'm tasting first. And already you can see that it's quite different from, well, it's really cold. I can hardly smell anything. When it warms up a little bit, you should be getting some nice sort of green, crunchy pear aromas, maybe even a little bit of sort of green apple, but not quite as tangy as a green apple. That's why I always talk about green pear, yellow pear, fresh pear, dried pear, poached pear. When I'm talking about Pinot Gris, I think it's a very peary kind of a grape variety. Yeah, I thought the Devil Bean Creek would be fabulous with the Thai chicken curry. Franz Haas is okay, not as good, but not offensive. Okay, good. Well, Pinot Gris is a really forgiving grape variety in general to match to food. So it's really hard to find a food match that's going to really be offensive with these sort of wines. But finding the really fantastic food matches takes a little bit more work. There we go. I can smell the pear now. Green, crunchy pear, a little bit of honey, a little bit of spice, but much fresher, brighter, greener in its aroma notes than the Pinot Gris that we had last week. On the palate, it's got this lovely fruitiness. Now, we don't talk about this very much, but because you guys are like, we're deep diving, so I can give away all the secrets. This wine is not completely dry. It's got a little tiny bit of residual sugar, only about sort of 3 or 4 grams. So it's not sweet wine. It's just, that's really interesting that you should say that, Craig. There's a couple of grams of residual sugar in there, but you shouldn't be able to taste it as sweet. It should just make it taste a bit more fruity, push the fruit forward a little bit. And I think that that's exactly what that does, because the wine tastes dry. It's got good natural acidity there, which makes it makes it quite crisp, but then that bit of roundness in the mid palate, it's fresh and bright and really, really delicious. Nina, homemade Singapore noodles sounds absolutely fabulous, and I think that will work. Not too much chili though. But the ginger, I don't even know what's in Singapore noodles, but yes. Yes, Craig. The Haas has got much more fruit expression to it. And I think, and I should have done I didn't even think to look it up until I got back on tasting with you guys right now. But I think that the Franz Haas is fermented in stainless steel. And I think that stainless steel fermentation is all about maintaining the fruit freshness and not developing savoury secondary characters. Whereas the Devil's Creek is fermented in old oak, so it doesn't hold the brightness of fruit as much as the stainless steel, but it allows more sort of textural, savoury characters to come through. It's really interesting because usually an Australian wine would be fruitier than an Italian wine, but it's absolutely the other way round with the Franz Haas compared to the Devil's Creek. John and Cotty are saying that the Franz Haas is more acidic than the Devil's Creek, and that's probably true as well. One way to test that is when you put the wine in your mouth, and even more so when you swallow it, if it feels really tangy and your mouth starts watering, your salivary glands start working, that's because the wine's got quite a lot of acid in it, and your mouth is trying to reset the normal acid level of the mouth. So it's creating saliva to neutralize that acid, and that really happens from that Franz Haas. The Devil's Creek is a bit softer, a bit rounder, and you don't get that big mouth-watery kind of finish on it. And it's not as tangy. It doesn't have that kind of lemony, appley. The Franz Haas for me has got a real kind of green apple tang to it, which I think is quite refreshing and lovely, and that brings forward that fruit as well. I would also say that I'd be very surprised if the Franz Haas had been through a malolactic conversion, whereas I know that the Devil's Creek has. So some different winemaking decisions, but one of the reasons that Franz Haas will have all that fruit intensity and also that higher level of acidity is because it's being grown in a cool climate that is cool partly because it's kind of heading north, but it's particularly cool because it's at a high elevation. The vineyards that this Pinot Gris fruit from Franz Haas would be coming from, I think I mentioned last week, but they would be sort of 800 to 1,000 feet above sea level, meters above sea level, high. And the Moorooduc Estate wines would be coming from about 70 to 90 meters above sea level. So much, and being right near the water here, we've got sort of a modifying effect on the hot and the cold differential. So they call that the diurnal shift between day and night, heat and cold. That's sort of modified by being close to the water here, whereas Franz Haas would have, in summer, they'd have really sunny, hot days and really cool, fresh nights, so the sunny, hot days would allow the fruit characters to ripen really well and get that really intense fruit character. But the cool nights would hold on to the acidity more for the Franz Haas. Nina, ginger would be fantastic with your Singapore noodles, because I find Pinot Gris, particularly the Devil's Creek, but I see it in the Franz Haas as well, has a gingery spice to it. Sometimes it's ginger flowers, sometimes, particularly in the Pinot Gris on skins. Hello, Jeff, how are you? And I hope you've got Sue with you as well. I hope you guys are well. I haven't seen you for a while. My next door neighbours, we usually see each other much more than we have in the last week for various reasons. But yeah, that sort of ginger spice, sometimes it's like ginger root, fresh ginger root that's been grated. So there's a gingeriness that comes through in good Pinot Gris as well. Now, what are other people saying? Alison prefers the Devil Bean Creek. I think we probably have indoctrinated you, Alison, but I like them both for different reasons. Yeah, Pete, absolutely. Very Spice Girls. Hello, Sue. The Devil Bean Creek is softer, it's rounder, it's got more textural quality, but it's got less of the kind of forward fruitiness. So I think it's really interesting. But yes, Alison, if you prefer Moorooduc Estate and Devil Bean Creek all the time, then that's totally okay. We allow you to be biased in this very safe space. Shell, the Haas, and it's interesting as well because a lot of people said to me last week, both during the tasting but also after the tasting, that they were surprised how much they liked the Franz Haas, and a lot of people said they can't like the Franz Haas better than the Moorooduc Estate Pinot Gris on the night. So it's interesting that now that we're kind of swapping the Estate Pinot Gris out and putting the Devil Bean Creek Pinot Gris in. I'm not quite sure what's going on with the lights here, but they seem to be kind of going up and down. I apologise. I have no control over the lighting that my computer decides to allow to work. When you've got sort of a fruitier style of Moorooduc Estate Pinot Gris next to the fruity style of the Franz Haas, then it's more of a fair comparison, I think. I think that the Estate Pinot Gris that we had last week was made so differently. It was older, very different characters to it. So it was a very interesting compare and contrast because they were quite distinctly different. These two are much more similar in their style, and so therefore you can sort of say, oh, I like the characters in the Devil Bean Creek better, or I like some of the aromas in the Franz Haas better today, or whatever. So yeah, and I think Shell's brought up a really interesting point that when you have the wine by itself, it's one way, but then often when you put them with food, they will play very differently. And Shell's saying that the Haas plays a lot nicer with the roasted garlic and Mediterranean flavours on the pizzas. And that's got a lot to do with the fact that it's an Italian wine, and Italian wines are always better with food than they are by themselves. The Devil Bean Creek, I'm not sure whether Devil Bean Creek will open up and play as well, Shell. It will open up a little bit, but it's a different shape wine. It's a different expression. I find the Devil Bean Creek actually copes better with sort of spicy Asian flavours than the Haas would, because it's just I guess maybe in Italy they don't eat those sort of spicy Asian flavours. A Thai chicken curry, you'd have to really go out of your way to find a Thai restaurant in Italy, and 9 out of 10 times you did, then it would be very Italianified Thai food, and a Thai chicken curry would taste very different from how it tastes here. We're very authentic. We're very true to different cultures' flavour profiles, and we're, here in Australia, if we're having Thai, we want to have that full Thai sweet, sour, salty and spicy sort of balance. Absolutely, Peter and Karen, there's a lot of chili down the south of Italy, but they don't put it together in the same way that the Thais do, and it's different chili. So completely different flavours. Think arrabbiata, sure, but that's chili and garlic and tomato. Whereas we're talking about Thai food, we're talking about chili, and mostly green Thai chili as compared to those red Italian chilies, which have more fruitiness to them, and fish sauce and soy sauce and coconut milk often, and kaffir lime leaves. There are a lot of characters that are quite hard for wine to match with in Thai food, and I find a wine like the Devil Bean Creek Pinot Gris actually handles those characters surprisingly well. Szechuan food as well is another type of food that's very chili based from China. Lots of chili, lots of garlic in that food. Again, very different from the Italian sort of chili and garlic balance. And amazingly, we find that our Pinot Gris and our Pinot Noir play really nicely with Sichuan food. So if you ever have a chance to give that a go, it's quite fun. Okay, the texture is definitely there in the Devil Bean Creek, absolutely, Craig, but it's just a bit fresher, crunchier. Hello, Jeff. Good to see that you're there. Sorry that your phone's dead and on charge, but nice to know that you're listening in and joining us. Bad spaghetti. um, yes, the Haas is better with tomatoes because it's an Italian wine, and Italian wine goes better with tomato-based things because there's so much tomato in Italian cuisine. This is kind of what I'm talking about. So it's not just about the chili, it's about what you mix the chili with, what the other flavours are. And Nina, I agree, often the chili is cooked out and softened in Italian food, but even in Thai food, when the chili is kind of put in, they put lots more chili in, and it's interacting with, as I said, things like fish sauce, which is salty and sometimes a bit sour. There's lime juice in there as well, so souring it up. There's sugar added to Thai food to give it a little bit of sweetness. There's coconut milk, and there's also the herbs and spices. And even if you compare Thai basil to normal basil is an Italian herb and is used in Italian food. If you get Thai basil, it's got a chili hotness to it and a spiciness to it that if you can't swap them over, you can't sort of make an Italian dish and throw Thai basil in it and expect it to work in the same way that a Thai dish with Italian basil in it doesn't work in the same way either. They need their appropriate flavor profiles. So Craig, the Devil Bean Creek's opening up with some creamy dairy flavors now. Yeah, absolutely. It always has some of those because it's been fermented and matured in old oak, and it's been through a spontaneous malolactic conversion. So you get some of those dairy characters coming through as well. Rob and Deb are asking me to elaborate on the observation that most Italian wines go better with food. It's a funny one. I had some rules in my head a while ago, but they sort of change every time I taste other Italian wine. But if you, for example, let's go really. Thank you, Peter and Karen. So really simple. What grows together goes together, and in Italy, the wine and the food has evolved over hundreds of years, and it's not surprising that they work together. But to me, it's more than that, because if you get so Mediterranean French food and Italian food often has similar ingredients. There'll be tomatoes, there'll be black olives, there'll be garlic, there'll be onions. Sometimes there's a bit of chili. But the way the French put them together, and there'll be olive oil, the way the French put them together compared to the way that the Italians put them together are completely different. So if you're in the south of France and you're having a ratatouille and you're having a glass of, let's say, Côte de Rhône, which is Grenache based, it works really, really well. If you're in Italy and you're having a spaghetti arrabbiata, which has got tomato and chili and black olives and garlic in it, then it's not going to go as well with your Côte de Rhône, your Grenache from France. It's going to go really well with the local wine, and the local wine that goes well with tomatoey, spicy Italian food is often something either in a white like the Franz Haas or a red like a Sangiovese or a Montepulciano d'Abruzzo. And the way I think about it with Italian wine, a lot of Italian wine just is quite closed. It has not a lot of fruit expression. And I know we've been talking about the nose and the fruit expression of the Franz Haas, but I think this is quite an unusual wine from Italy. Most Italian wine will be quite savoury, not very fruity on the nose or the palate, and the white wines have a lot of acid and texture, but not as much flavour. And Italian red wines have sort of savoury flavours and lots of tannin and acid structure as well. And the tannin and the acid really needs the flavours of the food and the oil and the salt and pepper and cheese and things to soften them and bring up the fruity characters of the wine. And so I think that's part of it. Do the experiment though, and make yourself a really classic Italian. Make a really good Italian spaghetti bolognese, let's say, and get a bottle of Pinot Noir and a bottle of Chianti. Open them both, pour 2 glasses, taste the Pinot Noir with the spaghetti bolognese. It'll be okay. It won't be awesome. And then taste the Chianti with the spaghetti bolognese. It'll be delicious. And they just the wine brings out the sweetness of the meat and the umami of the tomato, and the food brings out the fruit expression of the wine and just sort of softens out the tannins and the acid, which I think is super cool. Kay has just mentioned one of my favourite books, and there's also a TV series called Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat by Samin Nosrat. Amazing book. If you've got, I think it's on Netflix. So if you've got Netflix, watch the show as well. It's a 4-part series, and she does salt for one, fat for one, acid for one, heat for one. So just concentrates on each of the 4 elements that she's most interested in the book. And the TV show is beautiful. She's awesome. She's a really cool chef and just a really interesting person. And she goes traveling around, and the salt edition is fabulous. And I've actually been making her Ligurian focaccia since I watched it, which is basically making focaccia and then pouring salt water over the top of it before you cook it, because in Liguria they would get seawater and pour it over to salt the bread naturally. Obviously, I'm not going down to the beach and getting seawater, but I'm making a brine and pouring it over, and it's just delicious. So good. So I highly recommend that book as well, Kay. I think it's fabulous. Shell, so right, without the pizza and only comparing the wines, Devil Bean Creek, far and above the Haas in taste and mouthfeel, and then you put it in, and then you try the Haas with the food, and it just brings everything into focus. It's like having a couple of extra filters to go over your camera lens to focus things out. I think it's really really awesome. Good, thank you, Robin Deb. I'm glad that helped. Cotty's also talking about Nikki Stenyet's The Flavour Thesaurus, and I don't know that, but I'll be looking for it now. Yeah, Nosrat on Netflix. Good, excellent. Yes, Vesuvius wines as well, Craig. And you know those wines from, hello, Penny, lovely to see you. Ah, great to see you. That's all right, Penny. I hope you're having a drink of something on this Easter Thursday. And it's great to have you back. Welcome. We've got 2 Pinot Gris, so that's okay. And we're talking about food and wine matching, which I think is really cool. Craig, the wines from around Mount Vesuvius and the Mount Etna wines as well, the vineyards have really kind of interesting soil because of the volcano effect, and they're quite bizarre wines, and people are really excited by them. And again, you taste them by themselves, and they're quite challenging. But then you put them with food, and particularly food from the region, and they make total sense. And if you have a look at a map of Italy, Italy's basically a whole lot of little countries that's been stuck together, and that's politically as well as geographically. So politically, Italy wasn't one big country until whenever I start telling this story, I think I really should just revise my history before I start telling the story. But someone on the chat will be able to tell me when they came together. But it's less than 100 years ago that Italy's been Italy, and so you've got different dialects being spoken in different countries. And the reason that the different parts of Italy are so separate, and the wines are different, the food's different, and the people are different, is because there's a big mountain range that runs right down the middle of Italy. It's a long, narrow country that sticks out into the sea. Big mountain range that runs down the middle. It's almost impassable. So So you look at Tuscany is here and Abruzzo is over on the opposite coast, and they look like they're just a couple of hours between them in a car, but you can't get through. You can't get over the mountains. They're kind of tall, jaggedy mountains. They haven't cut a lot of tunnels through, so you have to drive all the way up almost to Milan and then back down again to get there. Thank you, Nina. The Risorgimento, 1860, so a little bit more than 100 years now. That's what happens as you keep getting older. The time frames get longer. But before the Risorgimento, you just had a whole lot of different countries. And if anyone's read, there's a fabulous book by an author called Di Lampedusa, who was actually part of the Italian royal, part of the royal family that he writes about. It's called The Leopard, and a lot of people have probably read it. And if you haven't, it teaches you a lot about Italy before just before and as it was becoming Italy. And it's an amazing book. It's beautifully written. You don't have to read it in the Italian. It's been very well translated. So The Leopard is a novel that if you haven't come across it, and you're interested in Italy, I highly recommend you read because it's really awesome. Alison, the Stanley Tucci TV show on Italy, I bet it is. He's awesome too. He loves food and he's a great personality. Really, really cool. Oh, the hounds with their ears, beautiful. So there's lots of good things to love about Italy, but until fairly recently, there wasn't a lot of good to love about Italian wine. And when I'm saying fairly recently, I'm saying in about the last 50 or 60 years. There were a number of famous Italian wines that have been being made pretty much the same way that they're made today for a long time, and those are things like Brunello di Montalcino, which is the oldest DOCG in Italy, which is their sort of quality assignation, and Brunello is the oldest, most famous Italian red wine. But you've also got Chianti, but Chianti back in the 1970s and even the early 1980s was not the Chianti that we get today. It came in those wicker-covered baskets. It was grown in vineyards with bad clones of Sangiovese. They overcropped it. It was light, watery, a bit vinegary, washed down your pizza all right, but was not nearly as exciting as the Chianti that we get now from Italy. They did a huge revamp of all the vineyards in the 1980s and 1990s. A lot of very passionate grape growers and winemakers did a lot to reimagine what Chianti could be. And the wines from Chianti these days, like the Poggio that we tasted last year, are absolutely delicious and yummy. White wine in Italy, even more so, relies these days on very modern winemaking, which has really only come to Italy in the last few decades. And this Franz Haas Pinot Grigio just would have been made in a completely different way 20 or 30 years ago. Absolutely, Cossi. Those wicker baskets are great for candle holders, great for your Italian restaurants with your red and white checked tablecloths, but not so good for drinking the wine out of. But white wine was even more dire in Italy until really recently because they didn't have a lot of stainless steel. Modern winemaking has really come to the rescue of Italian wines. But the awesome thing about the Italian wine industry is that they've held on to their traditional grape varieties, and they've held on to a lot of Italian traditions for making the wines. They've just modernized it and they've cleaned it up, and they've cleaned up the vineyards and they've cleaned up the wineries, and they're making more and more wines like this all the time, which I think is really exciting. Kate's Italy wine tour. Craig, I think that's right. We probably do need to organise it. I'm hoping that I might be able to go and do a bit of pre-planning for it later this year, but I'm not so sure if this year is going to be the year to go to Italy for me. But we'll get there. Don't you worry. And we'll practice drinking some Italian wines and eating some Italian food in the meantime from time to time. Now that Devil Bean Creek is coming up really nicely now. It's just coming up to room temperature for me, which is a much better temperature to have it at. It's got, next year would be fine. Okay. We'll see. Next year, maybe the year after. I'm not rushing into anything at the moment, but one of these days, you just stay tuned and we'll get there. The Devil Ben Creek is probably, it's not made in an Italian style or a French style. It's made in a Mornington Peninsula style. So we just work really hard to grow beautiful Pinot Gris fruit and then make it speak of itself as honestly as possible. So I think that sounds, that's really what's going on here. It's holding its structure really nicely, and it's quite savoury on its own. I'd be interested, Peter and Karen, how are your butter chicken dumplings? Are they working with either of the wines? We might have to go. Also, I think as we progress this little group, and we get a bit braver about getting out into the world, we might have to have a couple of little excursions. There's a really good Szechuan restaurant in Melbourne called Dainty Szechuan. It's in Toorak Road, and it's a real challenge with food. So, but one of these days we might go and have a little wine dinner there and see if we can find anything that works. Oh, and then Peter and Karen sent me a photograph of some butter chicken dumplings that they'd found at the local supermarket, and we were wondering whether they would work with either of the wines. So, but if they're low on spice, that's probably really good. I think the other thing that we could explore a little bit more later on in the year is sort of matching this wine, the Devil Ben Creek Pinot Gris, to Indian flavours, and the butter chicken is a good example. But even we were talking last week about Shell's Mediterranean flavours in her dips and those sort of things. And I was talking about the fact that chickpeas, the earthiness of chickpeas, works really well with this sort of wine. Cheeseburger gyoza the other night, they go with nothing. I can imagine. That sounds really scary, Craig. But yeah, I think maybe playing around with some different cuisines from different cultures that don't naturally call on these wines, I think could be really fun. Hello, Yusuf. Pinot Gris, Gewürz, and semi-sweet Riesling with spicy food. So I think Pinot Gris in the Devil Ben Creek style works quite well with spicy food. It depends how spicy you're talking about, but moderately spicy food works really well with a dry-ish Pinot Gris like this, because it doesn't have high acid. It's got quite soft flavours, and so it works really nicely with the flavours in the wine and the flavours in the spicy food. Gewürztraminer is something everybody says when they're teaching sort of wine courses and talking about food and wine matching. Often people say, "Oh, Gewürztraminer goes really well with spicy food." I've spoken to a lot of people in Singapore and in Hong Kong and in China about that, wine folk, and they all laugh and they say Gewürztraminer is awful with spicy food. We don't recommend it at all. It's a European fallacy. Doesn't make any sense. I think a semi-sweet Riesling can work quite well with spicy food, Yusuf, but it needs to not be too acidic. Yeah. I've kind of taken that on from people who know better than me, and I like Gewürztraminer. I like Gewürztraminer with sort of washed rind cheeses and smoky bacon and things like that. I think it's rather delicious in those flavour profiles. Penny is apologising about something, but maybe you have to go. Mr. Star, the Franz Haas. Franz Haas doesn't sound Italian, Penny, and I maybe didn't even really explain that last week. So thank you for asking the question. Franz Haas is an Italian producer in the Alto Adige, so right up in the north of Italy, in the foothills of the Alps and the Dolomites, mostly the Dolomites. And it's part of, so Alto Adige is part of the original Austro-Hungarian Empire. And in World War I, it got split off from Austria and Hungary and was made part of Italy. So made part of Italy, 80% of the people who live there speak German as their first language, and there's a lot of German names like Franz Haas in the area. So they then in World War II had a really terrible time because Mussolini said you're not real Italians and wanted to and excavated them all. That's not the right word, but you know what I mean. Made a deal with Hitler basically for all of the residents of Alto Adige to be sent to Germany to take over the farms that had been stolen from Jewish people who'd been sent to concentration camps that needed some good German-speaking people to run the farms, so they were sent there. And then Mussolini moved Italians from other parts of Italy into the area. After the war, when Germany and Italy really didn't do very well at the end of World War II, a lot of people came back to their homes in Alto Adige. They reclaimed their land. They became quite bolshy, and there was a lot of political and physical fighting for the land, but they got it back, and they now consider themselves to not really be part of Italy, but not really part of anywhere else as well. So it's quite a Germanic area. It's a bit like Alsace in France, that has been Germany for as much of its history as it's been France. It's France now, but it's not French like the rest of France. Alto Adige is not Italian like the rest of Italy, like WA, exactly, Penny. Craig, I love Rob and Deb have just said it. Barney Flanders Garagiste, Pinot Gris, Gewürztraminer is fantastic, but it's quite a distinctive style because it's skinsy, like a Pinot Gris on skins. So it's quite textural compared to other Gewürzes from Australia. There's a few good ones. I'm trying to think of any of the brands. Ochota Barrels makes an interesting one from the Adelaide Hills. There's a good one from Delatite. I'm not getting my names right. Delatite make a lovely Gewürztraminer. There's not a lot of Australian Gewürztraminers that I get very excited about, but I think the Delatite definitely is one of them. There's a few young guns of winemaking who are playing around with Gewürztraminer, and I'll do a little bit of homework over the next week and try and remember to report back to you next week. But there's a few good ones. I just drink the ones from Alsace. I think Alsace Gewürztraminer is delicious. Even the Hugel entry level, which retails for about $45 a bottle, is delicious. And I think it's really hard to go past that. Now, any other questions? Yusuf had a wine good Noel a few days ago. Yeah, it would have worked well with a light spicy dish because it's kind of lowish alcohol, bit of sugar. Yeah. What else? French Canadians. The Joma Gewürztraminer is really interesting too, Nina. It's a bit edgy like Barney's Gewürz. It's had a bit of skin contact and stuff, but it's very good. Anyway, I think Gewürz and Pinot Gris and Riesling are three grape varieties that are really delicious when you match them to the right food and you find producers who make them with passion. So do keep an eye out for them. They are a bit challenging sometimes, Gewürz particularly, because it's such a strong aromatic profile, and people think they smell it and it smells like honey and lychees and what's the other thing that it smells like? It's very floral, like rose petals, like rose water almost. And you think it's going to be sweet, and then you taste it and it's dry, but it's got all those perfumes, and it's quite weird. So there's a few other there's a grape variety in Italy that I tasted once. We imported a little bit of it from Montepulciano d'Abruzzo. It's called Lacrima di Cristi, which means the tears of Christ. But most Lacrima di Cristi in Italy is a white grape variety. This one's a red grape variety from Montepulciano d'Abruzzo, from Abruzzo. And it smells like Turkish delight or rosewater, like Nina's saying. And it's really weird. The importers brought it in for me once, brought a 6-pack in for me once, because I tasted it at the winery and really enjoyed it. But it was too weird for them to try and sell it. So I don't even know if they still make it. It was quite a few years ago. But there's all that kind of sort of fun stuff to discover out there in the world still. Oh, thank you, Shell. My ring. This is my ring that my mum got made for me. It's made from 3 different rings that belonged to her side of the family, and we designed it together and got it made to celebrate me becoming a master of wine. So it's the ring that I wear almost every day, and yeah, thank you. I'm glad you like it. It's a little bit sparkly, but it works for every day. Oh, Yusuf, you saw Kathy. Oh, awesome. Thank you. She's a beautiful woman. I look forward to catching up with her again one of these days. Anyway, on all of that, we've hit our 45-minute mark and gone past it. I am going to sign off in a moment. I'm going to remind you that next week we're doing the Magic Stalk Shiraz 2020, which will be fun. I feel like the weather's just turning, so I think it'll be time for us to have a little spicy, fruity red wine. Until then, have a fabulous, fabulous Easter. Yusuf, I look forward to coming over to South Africa one of these days in the not too distant future. I do need to go there. It is absolutely on my list of places to go. Have a beautiful Easter, everyone. Have a lovely long weekend. Don't eat too much chocolate. Have a nice glass of wine or 2 as well, just to balance it out. And I'll see whoever of you who can make it back next Thursday for Magic Stalk Shiraz. Happy Easter, everyone. Cheers.